Hi, everyone. Welcome to the digital experience team iteration retro. Today is Thursday, February 24th. We'll go over some of the things that went well and things to improve on from this last iteration. For things that went well, first up is Jess.
Carrie started, and we're super stoked about it. And she's fully onboarded. So she's actually doing design work now, which is awesome. And our design team is back up to 3, which is great. Happy to have you.
Next is me. I had a very cool pair programming session with Javi. We got lots of things done, both on his side and my side. So very productive. Nice to have those.
Yeah, I added a note just that like I want us to make some form of structure for us to like be able to like ask and receive help for stuff like this, because I feel like, you know, when we're blocked, it's helpful to have someone to like go in and do stuff, and then at other times when people have capacity to do things. Anyway, yeah.
Cool. We can jump into things to improve on. Barker has the first point.
Yeah. Something that they do over in the product, and I think we should do here is, you know, don't assign an MR, a reviewer until it is ready to go. Code is good, review apps passing, draft is removed, description says what changed, why, all the stuff. Because for me, once I see the to-do mark like come up, then I instantly go look at it. And then if I see it's not ready, I'm like, and then I have to come back to it, and you know, that can cause a delay.
I know this was kind of mentioned last week in the last retro, but there's just quite a bit of regressions that come through. I fixed a lot this week, and I think a lot of this could be solved if folks just take due diligence. Like if you touch a shared component, maybe just check pages that use that same component. I know Tyler mentioned here, I was gonna bring this up too. If you're using VS Code, you can search like within files. What I like to do is if you're touching like the copy viewed component, search for that and see what pages are consuming that as well, and just give them a look in your local or the review app. I think it can save a lot of time. Tyler, did you want to speak to more of your points?
Yeah, I have a lot here because I think that this is like the primary challenge that like collaborative teams face in web development. And I think that there are like established ways to solve it. And so, yeah, I mean, the first thing, we could change no processes and everyone could do an extra step of work, which is just Command Shift F in VS Code and just like look for all the references and then go look at them and see what broke and what didn't. That is like the quick and dirty way to just like not like it requires no change in our workflow other than people do that extra step. But I don't think it's sustainable because if you have 80 pages, like then you have to check all 80 pages. And since we don't have regression tests set up and we shouldn't, I still contend because we're not there yet. Like it's just like that's not a sustainable way to do it. The more sustainable way to do it, I think there are two paths. One we have tried in the past and like also I don't think shook out as sustainable for this team, but like maybe it's different now. I mean, like truthfully, we could all just write our own components. Like we don't have to have any shared components. I don't know. Like I know that's like I know a lot of people are really all about like drying up code, but like 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 I don't care personally. Like it might like copy paste is totally fine. It's, you know, a tried and true method. And like, maybe we don't need to dry things up until we're like really sold on how stuff works. But that was my approach with like the first iteration of Slippers. And I don't think that and I think people had other challenges with it and didn't like it. So I'm not advocating for that. Or I am advocating for it, but like not strongly because I don't think it'll fly. Here's the other approach, and this is what I actually wrote in the minutes. I think this should work and is like really important, and there's like 2 fundamental pieces of it. So like if there's a shared component and it must change, there are 2 heuristics that you can use to determine, should I change this shared component or should I make a new one, even if you want to make a new shared component. The first is, can I augment this with a single literal value prop, right? So a good example would be text alignment, left, center, right. So if you have if you have like a paragraph component and you want to change the alignment of the text, like, can you pass a single prop to it that says left, center, right, and accomplish your goal. If the answer to that is yes, then you should add the prop. You should also add a default value for the, so if you make the prop optional in view and then add a default prop to it, like keep the default prop how it is now, and then nothing else will break or change. And then in your use case, like use the augmented value, right? So that's the first way is using props. I think if like one prop with an object with a literal value, not an object, if that is sufficient to describe the differentiation, then you should do that. And like, don't worry about making a new component. The other heuristic you can use that is similar is, when we think about front-end web development, we think about like the layers of HTML as semantic markup, CSS as style directions, JavaScript as interactivity. Like the foundation is the semantic markup with HTML, right? And so if your augmentation to a component requires you to change the semantics by more than 1 degree, and what I mean is like, you might have a component that has an image and text, and maybe sometimes you don't want an image, right? I think that's basically conceptually, that is the same component. It is, an image text component with or without image. But if your component requires 2 semantic changes, that it is like now an image, it's either the image is toggleable, or it's a paragraph, or it's a list item, all of a sudden you're 2 degrees out in the semantics. And I think that we have lost the conceptual cohesion of that component, and you should have 2 components. One that is a image and text, so image tag, p tag, where you can toggle the image on and off, and another that is an image tag and like a UL tag where you can toggle the image off. And I think that conceptually, the single point of change for the semantics, once you go beyond a single point of change, I think that you're talking about a new component. This is just an opinion. Like there's not like a technical reason. Like you could write a component that took every HTML element and made them all toggleable, and it would be a hot mess, right? But you could do it. Like it's not wrong to do it. There might be a use case where you're like, this is a component that demonstrates how every single like semantic element in HTML looks in our styles, in our design system, right? Like you might actually have cause to have 150 different semantic elements in like one very niche scenario. But for like everything else, I think that if you are 2 semantic changes away, different component, totally different component, right? Even if it's like very similar, and you can use, and this is where I if Nathan were on the call, I think we could talk more about like slippers as the design system, because like, if our design system is a bunch of the atoms of like the p tags and the lists and like the images and like that sort of stuff, then we can make these like higher order components like composed of those smaller pieces. And I'm not sure what the direction is on slippers, because I have not worked on any of these code bases for the past 6 months. So I'm coming in here with just opinions and like not rooted in like the work everyone else is doing. But anyways, that's a lot. Those are my 2 heuristics. I think they work really well. I think that the props is like it's like a clever trick for, hey, I need to change this thing in this one instance, but I don't want to like break all the other alignments and stuff. Like use the default. That's why the default values are there for many reasons, but that's like one of the best uses of default values for props, is like we make a change to a component that doesn't have to like go out and mess everything else up. It's basically a feature flag, right? And a lot, if you think about it that way, you're like gating it behind and you're making it opt in, right? So like the behavior it has now is default. The augmented behavior is opt in. And then if you have to opt in to more than like 1 or 2 props, and like Barker asked this, like when do you make a new version? And that's where like the semantics come in. Or again, like if you add, like this is a number out of thin air, more than 2 props is another component too, right? Like same deal. Like I think that like, yeah, sorry, but we'll go soon. I think that fundamentally the point is like, if it is a variant of a thing, it should be like a small conceptual leap from this text is centered, it's left, it's right, this image is on, it's off, right? Versus like, this is 4 different things that can be configured in actually 12 different ways. I think that you're talking about 2 or 3 components in that regard. So that's everything. I know it's a lot.
I have thoughts. I would say like moving forward, we have a lot of global components like the accordion, benefits, block quote, cards, wrapper, carousel, that copy component. As you know, if you're working with adding props to that component, you know, maybe step back and like consider, should I just create a new component for this one? Or should I extend this component for this particular use case? Because we're having regressions because of it, which is okay. We're going to get regressions. It's not like it's going to happen. And we have a great team that can help us fix them really quick.
I also think that we have like components specific to some sections of the pages. So for example, we have a CTA for partners, a header that is different from the solutions one. So I think we have kind of made that at until some point, you know.
I also have a comment. At what point do we want to stop creating components in the buyer experience repo and start creating them directly in Slippers? Because I think the goal of Slippers is to have all the atoms there and just import in the buyer experience repo and not create new components there.
I'd say once Slippers is fully in and we're using all of the components that exist currently, it's like the first step we got to get to.
Right.
I would think that we would want to live in a future where we only create one-offs within the buyer experience repository, and anything that is shared across pages would live in Slippers. But I don't know if people have opinions on that. That's what I think we should move towards. But
We should, but like, I think that it requires a really clear delineation of like, what is a one-off component? Because a lot of times we make a one-off component that then gets used 3 times, right? And like no, I don't think anything is ever a one-off component, because if it's like a valuable thing to build, we'll probably want it in multiple places, right? So like even if we only have one cause to use it today, tomorrow we might want to put it in 2 or 3 places. And so I think like the thing to do, I think you're basically right, but I would like not call them one-offs, because like that just, it's like saying that I'm building a prototype. It's like no one ever builds prototypes. They all just become your production application. Like I think that like at some point we need to say, this is where the design system or this is where the UI kit ends. I know the design system is actually everything, but like this is where the UI kit ends, right? It ends with these atoms or these components. Anything that is a composition of these like building blocks should be done in Nuxt, right? Like we should consume the library and compose it. And then, yeah, but like I think like the challenge is that it is like a human decision, and there is like not a technical, like you could just put all of your components in Slippers. We could just build every single one. Like there's no technical reason we couldn't. So I think that like at some point, like we just like someone needs to be the decision maker on like, here is how far the UI kit goes. Right. And like these are the things that are in the package. And then anything that requires more composition must be done in Nuxt. Or maybe we just make an even broader rule of like, we never compose things in Nuxt. Like in Nuxt, you always only consume from Slippers, and we build compositional components in Slipper. I don't think that's actually the right choice, but like if you wanted to make it very straightforward and super simple, you could just say, if you're in Nuxt, you're not writing components, you're only writing pages, right? And if you're in Slippers, you can write components. I don't think that's the right call, but it would be very easy to reason about.
yeah, something that we might consider as well, as this has affected us in the past, is like how this affects the rate of our development time, to see if the decisions that we make affect us. Because I feel like it has in the past, and so I just wanted to like, yes, and like, yeah, I just want to throw that out there.
We can keep talking at UI to code group, and I think Nathan is like hosting more front end conversations also. So to be mindful of time, we'll keep moving. Yeah, lots of good question marks. I think we're at Tyler's point number 3.
This is, I think everyone felt like our last release video today and maybe last week was like clunky, like hard to manage because of all the screen sharing and the who goes next when. And like, I guess my question is, and this is really to Michael, honestly, because like one, like, why are we doing release videos? Like, what value do they give to the team? I'm not saying that they give none, but I don't actually know precisely what it is. And I think Michael is our biggest fan. Like, he watches all of these. So like, I would ask you, Michael, watching this now, or watching the release video, like, what do you get out of them? And like, in order to serve that goal, do you need us to all screen share? Do you need us to even record those videos, or can you get the same value out of looking at the iterations now that we're using? No, Laura, I do not send those videos to my parents. That's the end of your sentence. I don't send, I do not. But yeah, I would just ask, like, what value do we get out of release videos? We spend like half an hour every 2 weeks doing them. And like, I don't know, it's just like, it's a whole thing. Maybe we don't need them, or maybe we do need them. And if we need them, we should iterate on the format. I would advocate for just like not screen sharing ever, because I think these videos feel really great and natural and fluid. We're all reading a document that we don't need to share on a screen, because like anyone watching it probably couldn't like read any, like, I don't think that the text would be super crisp. So yeah, I guess that's my question, is like, what value and how can we make it better? And also, I propose we stop screen sharing during releases.
I had a follow-up point that might be moot, but yeah, if you have nothing to show, then maybe like we shouldn't be forcing ourselves to screen share if we're just going to talk with our board up on the screen, you know, like that's maybe not useful. If we are screen sharing, if we are continuing down this path of, you know, demoing visual stuff that we've done, that there's something to see. I prefer to screen share myself, even though I was super slow at getting my screen going today. I prefer to do it myself so that I can show some of the cool things that I did, you know, which someone else might not know where those tricks lie. But yeah, I agree that finding out who watches and why, and yeah, that would help us make an informed decision.
Maybe screen sharing is opt-in, right? Like in any meeting, like maybe we run it like a normal meeting that we record, and we go through the list and everyone talks about like stuff that's useful to say, and like maybe you're like, oh hey, like I want to show this thing, I'm really proud of it, or like here's this interesting bit of code or whatever to show. But like personally, like I can't remember a time in the last 6 months where I've had visual stuff to show, and I always feel silly sharing my screen because I'm like, here's the issues in MRs, like good luck reading them in the 10 seconds I talk about it.
Okay, so I have one final point that I think we can improve on the defaults that we are creating for our components, because in the remote case that the content is not there for a component, the page will just break because it's trying to read properties out of null. Because right now on the default for our components, we're mostly using null as the default for our data, which is where the content comes. So I think maybe we should have each component have a default of an object that will at least render an empty component instead of just blowing up the page.
That's a great idea. Oh, sorry.
Oh
Go
no,
ahead.
sorry, you're on the agenda. Go.
All right. Nathan had mentioned this, I think it was last week, just, you know, we should be steering clear of adding like component configurations in the YAML file. And okay, I don't really know the best way to not do that with the amount of pages and stuff we're doing and making, but you know, it is getting pretty messy. It's like, okay, this needs a border, this doesn't, this needs a shadow, this doesn't. Like, we're doing that in the YAML file. Like, when it's not just us authoring these pages anymore, how are folks going to know what they should be adding, where they should be adding null, things like that. But this was a good point, Mateo.
Counterpoint, it's awesome when stuff breaks, because then you know that it's broken. And if we add default values that are technically valid but incorrect, is it possible that they leak out into production because everything built totally fine, you got no errors, and you like forgot to swap in the actual content? I don't know the use case. Like, I just like, because I imagine this is situational, but I think that there is a lot of value in breaking your pages when stuff is like, sometimes it is nice to have all of your stuff break really fast, right? Like that can be a useful tool in and of itself. But I have no strong opinion because I haven't written a component in a long time. So, but just advocating for failing fast here.
I think-
Oh, go.
I was just going to say, for the case of these default props, they would not break on the pipeline. I think the earliest we would see it break, other than local, of course, would be on the review app. Just saying that.
Down the road, we're going to implement a CMS. We don't know which one. And all of this styling done via the data, I don't think it's gonna play nice. So I think we gotta really separate the content from the design and the code. We might have trouble later.
I think that's our last point. Sounds like we have lots to talk about in whatever meetings, UI to code and whatnot. Cool. I will stop the recording there. Thank you everyone for the good discussion.